Hello and welcome. You are watching Fourth Estate. This is the program where we tackle all things media and journalism right here in Zimbabwe. My name is Wadzanai Sansole, and every August, Zimbabwe honors the gallant sons and daughters who sacrificed their lives for our independence and our sovereignty. Heroes Day and Defense Forces Day gives us an opportunity to reflect on the ideals that gave birth to our nation. Now, the role of the media and the creative sector comes into focus. How do we tell our story? Who tells it? And to what effect? And in this week's edition, we explore the power of the media and film in constructing national memory, shaping collective identity, and bridging generational divides. On Fourth Estate today, we ask, is the media telling the liberation story with the depth and clarity that it actually deserves? And are today's storytellers carrying the torch of national pride? Or are we losing the richness of our heritage in the noise of the modern world? So our discussion is a Heroes Month. Is the media doing enough? And to have this conversation, I'm joined in the studio by Gibson Nyikadzino. He's a journalist here at Zim Papers. And Baron Bezel Mzembi, the coordinator from Ziftesa. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Great, let's get started. Right, I'm sure you can agree that the media plays a critical role in constructing national memory and identity. How do you assess the Zimbabwean media's coverage, Gibson, of Heroes and Defense Forces Day over the years?
Thank you so much. I think it's a critical starting point about how the media has been dealing with the issue of ZDF and our heroes. First of all, I would like to commend the progress that has been made in various media. It could be print, it could be film, it could be any other platform, electronic. However, more needs to be done from a historical point of view and also a futuristic point of view. By historical point of view, I mean there is need for us to have think tanks that drive the narrative about our historical experiences under colonialism and the heroism of our liberators, so that for posterity we have a point of reference and also a point of a compass that's pointing to where we are going. So in as much as much has been done, but we also need to address the core idea of where are we getting this information? How relevant is it? How do we frame it so that it speaks to the modern generation, so that young people are able to relate with what is happening? So I think it is, in a cultural sense, one of the things we really need to do so that this story does not die when our liberators, the generation of our liberators, cease to exist. There has to be a lot of continuity. And this narrative should be a narrative that is driven by us as Zimbabweans. So I think for a greater part, of course, we really appreciate what is there, but we need to do more. We need to improve our systems in that regard.
Now, Bezel, the question is, are we doing enough in actually preserving the legacies of our heroes? And film is one of the most powerful tools of preserving history and shaping collective memory. So how well do you think Zimbabwean cinema has portrayed the liberation struggle and the heroism of those involved?
Well, as we begin this program, let me first and foremost acknowledge the tireless efforts of our forefathers, our aunties, our mothers and fathers, who fought for the liberation of this country. The country that we call our own today is a result of their toil and sweat and blood and pain. I would also want to extend my gratitude to the men and the women in uniform for the tireless sacrifice that they undertake almost on a daily basis to make sure that Zimbabwe is a peaceful and enjoyable country as we strive to achieve Vision 2030. I would like to say, in response to your question, film is quite an important instrument when it comes to shaping public perception. I wouldn't want to lie to say we have done everything that we really need to do in terms of how we should portray our values, our beliefs as Zimbabweans. There's still a lot that we need to do. For example, the story of the liberation struggle is slowly fading away. There's been a lot of misinformation and disinformation going on concerning the liberation struggle and our heroes. Some have even gone an extra mile of denigrating these efforts. And we need filmmakers to come together and say, let us document this history. Let us put this history in documentaries. Let us create films. We need progressive storytellers and script writers who come together and say, ladies and gentlemen, let us put these ideas into film so that the next generation will have something to refer to as history. Because remember, we have a history. The liberation struggle itself is where we derive our authenticity as a country. That is where the bedrock on which even our national interests are built. So we need filmmakers who are progressive, who would say, let's come together and document this. So we have not done enough as filmmakers. There's still a lot that we need to do.
Now, Gibson, in light of what he's just said, the media is sometimes criticized for taking a narrow event-based approach when covering commemorations like Heroes Day and Defense Forces Day, focusing mainly on ceremonies rather than substance. Do you believe there's room to diversify our storytelling so that the legacy of our heroes is woven into narratives of national development and building for the future?
Yeah, of course. I think in terms of diversity and doing other things differently, we really need to do that. Because, for instance, I like what you were saying. I would want to agree with him. You know, if I were a theologian, I would quote Jesus when he said, greater love is no man that he lays down his life for friends. Like what you were saying, our military men, they have taken an oath to defend our country. They've taken an oath to die in defense of the motherland. So it is not a good idea, in my view, that we write more and speak more when we are going towards the Heroes Day or the Defense Forces holidays. We really need to do and update information on a daily basis. Imagine what happens when someone dies, a prominent figure in Africa dies. You first get obituaries from BBC, CNN, and because they update and record every day. So I think in terms of how we do things differently, in regards of preserving this history, it has to be documented on a daily basis. We have to talk to our leaders on a daily basis. We have to discuss, even at institutional level, what should we do, what role should journalists play in terms of framing these issues. That's another point I wanted to highlight, is that's where I always clamor for ideological journalists, people who are really interested in the ideals of the state, whether it's national policy, foreign policy, and other interests, so that you don't just have people who would speak different stories when we are trying to shape narratives. So I think there is a lot that we need to do in terms of diversifying this subject.
Now, Baron, when Gibson gave the Jesus analogy, it just reminded me of the movie The Passion of Christ. Whether you're Christian or not, you have a full picture and understanding of exactly what he went through because someone painted that for us. And recently there was that release of the Nehanda movie, which also just really painted a picture of this is an idea of what life was like for her. So when you think of film, how can film be used to not just commemorate an event, but also educate Zimbabweans and about the depth and sacrifice and just paint this picture so that it helps shape the nation? I know you also mentioned that there's a bit of an underappreciation and probably misunderstanding of exactly how it was.
All right. Film, by its very nature, is a representation of our day-to-day life. It carries out the message that we live as people. What we do, what we breathe, what we say, what we eat, that's just film. It is an expression of our culture. It is an expression of everything that we call our own. Let me put it this way. Whether it's an assumption or it's true, we'll discuss that later. If there is, I would put it like this, if there is ill will or rather suspicion between the civilian and the members in uniform, right? If there is such a thing that people, when they see someone in uniform, they are gripped in fear. One thing that can demystify the relationship or lack of it between the military, because the Heroes and Defense Forces has got military issues. There are military involved. So if there is that divide between the military and the civilian, one thing that can bring those two entities together is film. I'm talking in terms of civil-military relations. If you want to educate a nation about the importance of the military element, or if you would want the people to know the importance of the liberation or of the heroes, one thing that can bring the two ideas together, the people and the military or the heroes, is film. So what I'm saying is we need filmmakers who will champion civil-military relations. That way we can educate our people on why we need the defense forces. Why is it important? Because you find out that certain people don't even go to the stadium when they are called out to celebrate the achievements of the defense forces. They think peace is just something that they wake up in their houses, something that people don't have to work for. But when we call them out without telling them, without actually first conscientizing them and informing them about the importance of this event, they may not exactly know what we are talking about. So film then comes in as a bridge to educate and to let people know about the importance of these programs. So my message goes back to filmmakers. Ladies and gentlemen, what are we doing? Why are we focusing on funny things when we have serious national issues that we need to really put on national television, even on social media?
Okay, so you're giving out a call for people in the film industry to partner and actually create stories and movies that could help, isn't it, in that. Now, gentlemen, the recently operationalized Broadcasting Services Amendment Act places strong emphasis on promoting local content across television and radio. And so, in your view, does this mark a critical opportunity for increased production of national development content, particularly stories that speak to our identity, our heritage?
Yeah, I think the idea of the amendment is key in many aspects, but the biggest one is when we produce content in our local languages, firstly, we own the content. That's the key thing. And we are producing content that speaks to our day-to-day livelihoods. Whatever happens thereafter, whether we would want to use, for instance, English in terms of having a regional, continental, or global outreach, is another issue. But the biggest thing that should make this initiative viable is financing of our local film industry or the broadcasting industry. Remember, we are saying film is an industry. There is no industry that moves without funding. And remember, while we have a certain component where private players should chip in, the biggest driver of this initiative, in my view, should be the government. Because once we lose our reputation as a people, once we lose our character as a people, it will be very, very difficult to fight and get it back. So, in my view, it is key for the government to entirely fund this industry, especially the media sector, because it shapes narratives, it builds public opinion. That's why, for instance, when other countries go to war, for instance, they don't tell you what is going to happen. They will only tell you who's going to win and who's going to lose. So already they begin to prime people. So the government, I think it should fund this Broadcasting Service Amendment Act. It is okay, but without money, we'll be trying to brush our teeth using an oil rig. We won't do much. Yeah.
Now, Gibson, as you continue to shed more light on this, Heroes Day is not just a reflection on the past. It's also a moment to shape future ideas. Many young Zimbabweans, however, feel that sometimes they're disconnected from the liberation war narrative itself. They probably don't even understand it. What do you think the media should be doing differently to engage the younger audience?
Firstly, look at the way we present information. One, the way we present, the way we tell our stories, and we also need to get feedback from the people, the young generation. Our older generation, they are the guiding compass, they are the visionaries. The young generation, they are energetic. So in that energy, we need to find feedback from them. Remember, there is one big historical institution that we have in Zimbabwe, the Museum of African Liberation. It started as an idea to have a mobile film clinic, telling stories through a mobile film clinic. But that idea, it grew. We also need to sustain it. How should we make sure that the young generation, they are also part and parcel of this initiative? So I think we need to find ways that are of interest to the young generation without losing the prime importance of our liberation story. And there is also need for people to respect our military men and women. I always feel pity for people who celebrate when a man in uniform is harassed in the street. I don't think that's key, because if you celebrate a person who is being harassed, the same person who is committed to ensuring our national stability, to contribute to our defense, suppose we face internal or external threats, how do you think that will be resolved? So I really think we need to find initiatives that we have, so that we also complement them with other initiatives.
Now, Bezel, just adding on to the key points he's raised, and if you look at how young people are looking for something informative and inspiring and also want to see themselves as a part of the national story, what role does film play in bridging the generational gap?
All right. We have a generation of consumers. It's a reality. The generation that we have currently consumes. They consume information from all over. And it worries me when we do nothing, or when we do not do much to make sure that that which they consume is from within, right? Most of the information we have, even about Zimbabwe, it comes from somewhere. So it is important that we create content, or rather film, that speaks directly to the experiences of our past and the current experiences that we are having. So film takes two forms. It entertains and educates. In other words, it edutains people. So if the filmmaker is not in his right state of mind, he or she may think they have very little role to play in terms of making sure that this generation connects with the past events.
Okay, now so seeing that we are getting to the end of our show, how can we get to that point without actually trivializing the history itself, Gibson? Or even
I would say historians should take center stage they should inform the writing of scripts. Filmmakers themselves should take interest in the studying of history without actually denigrating that which they don't know. They must also be Zimbabwean in their approach and African in their DNA. They should love that which is Zimbabwe and love that which is Africa. Because if you do not love Zimbabwe, you cannot produce that which speaks to the lives of Zimbabweans. So let us be Zimbabweans first before we are producers of content. That way. And I also want to believe that even the education system should incorporate film in the curriculum. At very tender ages, they should learn about film, so that when they grow up, they shape up into filmmakers who have strong ideological foundations. That's what I can say for now.
Now, Gibson, traditional media formats, print, radio, and television have long played a central role in telling stories of the liberation struggle, especially around commemorative periods. However, with the shifting of media consumption, interests are different now. So when you look at issues like podcasts and digital storytelling, what can the media also do to make sure that they're on that wavelength?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because, new initiatives are coming and they speak to different modes or practices when you look at the formats. But I would say traditional media, whether it's government or independent, they have to take the lead from the government itself. That's my thinking. Why am I saying that? At one point, I went to Israel. In Israel, they have got a museum that is every name of every soldier they lost in different wars. That's an example. But here in Zimbabwe, we've got people who died in various battles. We know of the Battle of Mavonde. We've got people who died at Nyadzonya. But we have not been able to cultivate or have their names inscribed somewhere in terms of memorializing their bravery and also what we want to preserve for posterity. So I think while there is independence of media in terms of shaping the narratives, this independence should also be tied to the policy of the government, for instance, in terms of preserving what we have heard. For instance, there are stories that we have heard orally from our heroes who are living today. They tell us of the Neander front in Mashonaland Central and other things. The age should not be with maybe podcasters or what, because the dynamics are changing, but the age should be what are we preserving, what are we doing for our own people, so that what we have is not lost 10 years, 20 years or 30 years from now.
Only because of our time, we have to end this now and wrap it up. But this has been interesting. Thank you very much for making time to come and talk about this. We're talking about, is the media doing enough when it comes to covering heroes and defense forces commemorations? And I was joined in the studio by Gibson Nyikazino, journalist from Zim Papers, and Baron Bezo Mzembi, coordinator from ZIFTESA. Thank you very much again, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
I've been your host, Wadzanai Sansole. Pleasant viewing.